Allie. Join me as I show you how to make this beautiful Crystal Passage Bracelet. You can make it 3 wide like we're doing, combining with the crystals, or even just a single row into a wrap bracelet. If you need any crystals or DiscDuos, go ahead and look below the video in the description. We always put links right there for you to get back to our website. Gather everything up on your bead on it board and let's get started. So to begin this bracelet, we have some 8/0 seed beads, some bugles, and these are the smaller 3mm Miyuki bugles, 15/0 in silver, a DiscDuo, and then a 15/0 in the metallic plum iris. We're going to be creating these little discs that are surrounded by the bugle beads, and we are going to begin with a stop bead on some size 8 dragon thread. I'm using white and I have a size 11 needle on here. I do have about 10 inches left before my stop bead here, so that way I can go back and put on the clasp after I'm done creating. To begin, we're going to pick up our first DiscDuo, and the DiscDuo, we are going to drop that down next to that stop bead, pick up one of our 15s, 1 8, 1 15, and we're going to go down through the second hole of the DiscDuo. So up and back. Give a nice tight pull so it goes right up there to that stop bead. Grab another 15, 8, 15. Again, I'm using that silver color, and back up through the DiscDuo. Give a nice tight pull there. And I'm going to go back through my 15, 8, 15. And then we're going to put on some of our bugle beads. Here out the side, we are going to use a bugle, a 15, and then another bugle bead. And we're going to go through the other side of our 15, 8, 15. Just kind of move that stop bead out of the way. After you get past this first one, you won't have stop beads on anyway. Once you're to the other side here, you're going to do the same thing. Bugle, 15, bugle, and up through that section again. As we come out of that section here, I want you to go back into the 15 and out that first bugle bead. Here's where we're going to add 3 of the alternative color of our 15s. And then we're going to go into the bugle and back around those beads again. So even though it is a very simple design, there's a lot of thread going around the exterior here. Back over through and out through that first bugle bead. Once you're out through that first bugle, that's where you're going to add those darker seed beads on the outside. Back up through, and the whole way then through the 15 and the 8 and out. When you give a nice tight pull, that really frames in that DiscDuo. From here, we are going to do a connector. And I'm going to do, to start out, a simple right angle weave connector. So we're going to do 3 of our amethyst beads here, going back into the purple bead that we're coming out of. As we do that right angle weave, I want you to reinforce, adding a 15 through every one now of your 8/0 seed bead. Give a nice tight pull. That should pop that kind of between them. 15 through the next 8/0. Get that knot out of there. While I work on this knot, keep going and go through each one of your 8s, adding a 15/0 between them. Once you're through and have all of your 15s added, I want you to come back up through the project here. And I'm only going to go through the 8s just to pull that in a little bit closer. And we are going to go from the side 8 then to the top of the 8 here. From here, we're going to do our next style of our DiscDuos, and then we repeat the same things over and over. Coming out through the 8 here, I want you to grab a 15, go into the DiscDuo. We're going to repeat just like we did, going through the first hole of the DiscDuo, adding our 15, 8, 15, back down through the DiscDuo, add one more 15, and then go through that 8 that we're sharing there at the top. Sharing that 8, then we're going to come down through the 15, right on the opposite side. And this time, instead of adding 2 bugles and a 15, we are going to do the opposite here. We're going to add a 15 in our lighter, 15 in our darker, 1 bugle, 15 darker, 15 lighter, and over to the opposite side. And that's just going to cap the outer edge, kind of keeping it simple. Give a nice tight pull. Same thing here, 115 lighter, 115 darker, bugle, darker 15, lighter 15, and into that side, over into the 8. And then we're going to go up through the piece here, around the sides, over to that 8-0 seed bead. Once we're in the 8-0 seed bead, it's time to do our connection once again. And our connection once again is right angle weave. We're doing 3 of our 8-0s back into the 8-0 that our thread was coming out of. And I kind of flip it in my hand to hold it a little bit easier. Go in here and go up through that first 8 on the right hand side. Then go the whole way around, adding a 15 between each of the 8s. Again, to tighten it up, to hide a little bit of thread, and to give a little bit of that silver look. And then as you finish up, you're going to go back around the project, back around that right angle weave, up through the 8s till you get to the top. Once you're here at the top, it's time to go back into this design. So we're repeating the first one. You're coming out of the 8, out of 15, into the DiscDuo, 15, 8, 15. Back down through the DiscDuo. When you exit through the opposite side here of the DiscDuo, on goes a 15 and through the 8. When you're through that 8 there, we are going to go down through the 15 as well. And here's where we go back to that first pattern of 2 bugles with a 15 in between. Going around the whole outer edge. Going around the seed beads that hang out on the sides. 15 or bugle, 15 bugle. Into the 3 seed beads that sit on the end. The 15 along with the 8s. Through that first bugle bead then after the 15. And before going into the next bugle bead, we're going to exit prior to the 15. We're going to add 1, 2, and 3 of our 15s and come down that bugle. Circling around, we're going to do the same thing on the other side, going through those seed beads on the outer edges. And then once again, doing our right angle weave here to be our connector. You can see it's a very simple pattern of 3 basically. You're doing this first DiscDuo, then you do the right angle weave, then you do the second DiscDuo style. And you can change up whatever you want. If you want to do no right angle weave in between each, you can do no right angle weave and just have them connect with a single 8-0. You can switch it up and just repeat over and over. You could add some crystals to the interior. So it's really showing you how to do 3 different designs, kind of hugging that round duo bead, or DiscDuo bead rather, and connecting them all through that design idea. When you get to the center of the design, if you want to, you can skip the 8-0 right angle weave section. That'll bring a little bit more concentration into the design itself towards the center. I'm adding a 15-0 after coming out the last 8, just as if I would be getting ready to add my next DiscDuo. And instead I'm going to add another 8 of 15. I'm going to add another one of my DiscDuo beads here. In between the DiscDuos, I'm going to do 1 15, followed by another DiscDuo. And then we're going to repeat the pattern so it sits on the opposite side. So you're going to do a 15, an 8, a 15, then another 8, and that's going to be that one right here. And then we're going to basically start over. So right here, we're going to start over with that same design. So you're going to do a 15, followed by an 8, followed by a 15, and then a DiscDuo with a 15 between each. Once you get back to this starting side then, you're going to do a 15, and then an 8, a 15, and then back into that 8 that we're sharing. And that's going to kind of get that little butterfly effect that we're looking for. From here, we're going to get to the outer edge and increase the design before we go back and start to downside for the other side of the bracelet. Coming out the design here, I want you to go through the first 15-0 after the 8, and you're going to add a 15-0, a bugle, and then 2 15-0s, one of your lighter color and one of your darker color. In the middle here, we're going to add a 15-0 in the lighter, 15-0 in the darker, followed by an 8, 15, and in the darker and then the lighter. And that's going to link those on the side. Over here along this side, we're going to repeat. So we're doing darker, lighter, bugle, and then we're going to go into the 15-0 that sits between the 8 and the 15. Out that second 15-0 right there. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So on the other side here, we're going to do our lighter of our 15, and then our bugle, and then our lighter 15, and then our darker 15, and out towards the exterior. When you're on the exterior there, you're doing lighter, darker, 8, darker, lighter. From there, skipping from one side to the other, putting that right in the middle. Coming out here, darker, lighter, bugle, silver, and then again into that 15, 8, 15. That gets that design centered there in the middle. And we still get to go in and add on to this 8 here and continue our design with that opening. So to begin, I have size 8 dragon thread with a size 10 needle, and I have a stop bead on the bottom of about 3 feet of thread. I'm going to begin with my DiscDuo, and the DiscDuo is going to start out that we put it onto our thread and needle, and then we are going to add a 15, 8, 15 to our needle, sewing back through that DiscDuo down towards the stop bead, going through hole number 2. That's going to put that 15, 8, 15 collection right at the top of the piece, and we're going to do the same thing at the bottom of the piece. Going back through then the opposite side of the DiscDuo. So right here when you're looking at it, we'll bring the camera a little closer, you're going to have the 15s again on the sides of the 8 next to the DiscDuos, and we're going to go through right now, and we are going to get ready to add some beads to the side that we will attach to. We're going to add into the side, going through the 15, 8, 15, coming out through the 15 along the side here. I want you to add one of your bugle beads in the 3mm, a 15, and a bugle. Go through the same beads on the opposite side, 15, 8, 15, and do the same thing on the exterior of the opposite. Again, bugle, 15, bugle, and in through the exterior. Once you have that, we want to make it look even a little bit more jazzy and then also have something to connect to. So we're going to go back through the sides here, watching my thread and needle, going through the 15, coming out through that bugle bead. We're going to add 3 more 15s and drop down through the bugle. That's after, down through the 15, over across the 8s, Doing the same thing on the other side, coming out after bugle number 1. Just kind of move that stop bead out of the way. 3 15s, and we're going to be catching on to that 15 eventually as we build more rows, and back out through our 8. After our 8 here, we're basically just going to be on repeat. So to repeat, how we're going to go is we're going to do a 15. We're going to pick up a secondary color of our DiscDuos and do the same thing on the opposite side. 15, 8, 15. Dropping that all down towards the last one. Go back through the DiscDuo second hole towards that starter side. When you get to the starter side, you are going to add one more 15 and go into the opposite side of the 8-0. So we're sharing that 8-0 there. We're going to repeat now, going through the 15, and on our sides, add our bugle, 15, bugle. And while you're working, the bugles are really thin and they're hard to manufacture. So if you see a bugle that's not quite right, just push it off to the side and toss it. A lot of bugles come in a tube. In through the 15 then, off the other side. When you're out the other side of the 15, repeat. Bugle, 15, bugle. Back through to the same starter side. And then once again, we're going to decorate our side with 3 more 15s, separating out the bugles. So you're taking your needle and thread to the top of the side between the bugles. 1, 2, 3 15s. Down through the bugle. On the opposite side. And I know it's a lot of thread to start. Here on this side then, we're going to go in and do the same thing. 1, 2, 3 seed beads, frame it out into the next bugle, into the 15, 8, 15. And then if you want to, a little cheat to get to the other side without having to go up and around the side is once you're out through the 15, remember that's connected to the DiscDuo. You can go straight through the DiscDuo to the opposite side, out through the 15 that sits after the DiscDuo, and then out through the 8. 2 on, 12 million to go. It's not a quick bracelet, that's for sure, but it really is going to be a beauty as you go in and add. So same thing here, you're going in now, switching colors, going back in and doing our 15, 8, 15. And catching on to those bugles, or adding those bugles then after into the sides and adding the 3 15s on the sides of them. Once you have that through there, you add another 15, go in to that shared 8 through the opposite direction. That pulls it in tight, and then off to the sides again, adding those bugles. So you're just going to keep going, creating your bracelet the length that you need it by adding in your bugles and your 15s and your 8s with your DiscDuos alternating in color. So as you build the paths here, what we're going to do for this crystal pathway is create the crystals in the middle. You're going to do that one side. After you're done, we do the second side, matching and mirroring. Do you have to do 2 colors? No, you can certainly do 1. I like the change up to kind of keep a little bit more of variety. Now I've gone ahead and connected once at the end here, just so you can see this connection point. And I'm going to bring the camera in a little bit closer so you can see those silver beads that are forming almost like an X in there, and then our 4 millimeter bicones that are sitting in the middle. With the 2 strands created separately, it allows it to sit correctly. So you can, if you want to, attach a single bead and keep going, but this one here, this is kind of the easier way to go up and down the project, in my opinion. So we are going to start at the very end here. And the very end, we are going to start with basically having 2 needles on the end of our thread. So I have my 1 needle on the end of my thread, and I have my thread ends from the starter side I'm not really worried about. I will get rid of those when I go in and add and put on my clasp. I'm going to put my needle on each end here. And why am I doing 2 needles? It's to keep it nice and even in the middle. So here in the middle of the piece, we are going to, number 1, put on a 4mm bicone. Let it drop down to the base of our thread. And now we're going to go in and look and see how we are connecting it. We're going to connect it to this first or outermost 15-0 that sits at the ends. Before each, we're going to put a 15-0 on our thread and needle. One on the right, one on the left. Drop that down to the middle of the design. And then we're going to sew up through that middle bead. I'm going to sew up through the middle bead on the right. And I'm going to sew up through the middle bead on the left, joining those 2 sides together. You want to make sure as you do so that you have an equal amount of thread still on each side of the piece. Coming out from here, we are going to add another 15 on each needle. We're then going to take a new 4mm bead, and we are going to cross through that 4mm bead. That pulls a second bead right in there and connects those 2 in a unit. From here, we're going to go down through the middle bead and go up through the side to get to our next point on the sides where we connect. If you want to, you can also hop from one to the other with just a couple, 1 and 2 of your 15-0s, 1 and 2 15-0, and then get ready with your next 4mm bead, crisscrossing between that first bead there, getting that right in place, adding a 15 on the left, adding a 15 on the right. Once again, sharing the 15 that's already there from that corner unit that we've connected. Not getting caught on your pliers. We're going to bring that back here. It's hard because the piece, I want to pick it up and work on it, but I want you to be able to see what's going on here. 15-0 on right after, and then up through the one on the left. Once you have those on there, and I'm going to have to take this off, I have 1 extra 15 there. You're doing the exact same thing with your 15-0 on left, on right, crisscrossing through the next 4mm bead, and basically just treating it almost like a zipper and zippering it up from side to side. From here, 1 and 2 15-0s go on, and you start with your next piece. This is going to create that center path of your 4mm beads, and it always gets 1 extra bead as you go in and start the next one. Starting the next one, we're crossing through the 4mm. After we add those 2 beads and cross through the 4mm, we're connecting our next piece by adding 1 15 and going up through that middle bead on the left, middle bead on the right. So the only time you're using the 2 15-0 seed beads is when you're getting ready to connect to the next side, or the next side piece there. So 2 basically in between are groups of 2. Nice tight pull, and that gets that in there in the center. From here, another 15-0 goes on, another 4mm. You can see here is how I do it. Generally, I'm going to hold with the left, hold on the right, and do 2 beads at one time. And there we go. So that zippering up of the center is going to allow us to connect all of these sides together. Once we get through the end, we'll connect with the end that's already there, filling in this passageway down the middle full of those crystals. At the end of the bracelet now, what I want to show you is how we're going to add the clasp. I went back and forth whether or not to add a clasp with multiple loops, but I really love that I can take this clasp garden interchangeable clasp and put on a cabochon that matches kind of perfectly with it. So I am adding, right after my last crystal, 2 15-0s along with 1 8-0 seed bead. Taking that 8-0 seed bead through both threads through that 8-0 seed bead. From here, I'm going to go into my clasp, sew through this loop. The nice thing about this loop here with these clasps is that it's soldered closed, so you don't have to worry about it opening up. I'm going to go back down through that same 8-0 seed bead with both needles in the same direction towards the bracelet. Pull that nice and tight so you don't see a lot of extra thread. I'm going to separate out my needles, just grabbing whichever one I grab first. Go down through the 2 15s prior to my 4mm crystal, through my 4mm crystal. I'm going to go back through the 2 seed beads on the opposite side, and then I'm going to go through my clasp one more time, going through that loop on the clasp here, back down through the opposite side through the 8-0. And then because my thread is silver, or because my thread is white next to silver beads, I'm just going to take my 2 thread ends here at the end and simply tie them together, right over left, left over right. On the other side, I'll do the exact same thing with my other side of my clasp. Now, the one thing that you want to make sure with the other side of the clasp is that when you are putting on your bracelet, that you make sure that it's facing the exact same way. So when I put my cabochon in, when I put it on, it's going to lock inside. And you can see I kind of have the perfect outfit on for this, just a black dress with a jean jacket. It goes so well and sparkles like crazy. Can't wait to see your different versions and colorways in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Make sure to post there. From here, I'm going to go back down through one of the beads along the side with one of my needles, kind of pulling that knot in towards the center. Going back through the crystal here, I'll go back along the edge, separating out the threads so that way when I burn, I'll burn one close down there, one close here, and then I burn right along the side so you hardly see any of the extra thread. When it comes to gluing this in, you can use some E6000, you can use some Loctite, a little dab will do. So I'm just going to put that in right to the middle there. Close that up. I like these small bottles because they don't dry out. The Loctite ones are really nice too. I'm going to take my cab, glue that in there, flip over. Now I'm back to my starter side, or I guess it's kind of my ending side. And both of my threads are not crazy long here. These are when I was building each individual strand. This is the end. What I'm going to do is start with a needle on the longer piece, keeping the shorter piece so that way I can tie them back together, going and feeding my thread and needle through that 4mm bead. And just like I did on this side, 2 15s up to the 8 and through the clasp to finish up this lovely crystal pathway bracelet. Thanks so much Potomac Beaders for joining me in creating this crystal passage bracelet. It's really fun to do, and like I said earlier, I can't wait to see your colors. As always, if you haven't yet, hit that little subscribe button and check out the full link and list of all the materials in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.